What's up, guys? My name is Robin and I make stuff and I am back. It has been a minute. I've been gone. There were a lot of things that happened. I lost the studio space that I was in pretty unexpectedly, which forced me to be at home and create art and talk to you guys. And clearly that didn't happen. I mean, literally, it's probably been 6 to 8 months. I apologize to all my faithful followers, but I'm back, baby. I'm back. And I'm in a new studio space. Check it out. I have my watercolors behind me. I've got tattoos happening over there, and I have beautiful window light coming in here in Bellingham, Washington, and I'm excited to be talking to you. Let's kill two birds with one stone. I am teaching classes to live humans. Why not record that and give that to you out there on the tube? When I start my class with my students, I typically take them through 3 weeks of just using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And let me tell you why I do that. I'm gonna flip this around so you guys can actually read what I'm doing. This is a color wheel. We have 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Red, yellow, and blue. In between those primary colors, we have what we call secondary colors or complementary colors. Here in the United States, for Christmas, we use 2 very obvious complementary colors, red and green. To get the green color, you take the other 2 primary colors. We already have red, so that leaves yellow and blue. You mix those together and voila, you get green. When you mix all 3 primary colors together, you get black, or a very dark, muddy color. When you mix a primary color and a complementary color together, very simply, you are mixing a primary color plus those 2 other primary colors that you used to make that complementary color together. So essentially, you're mixing all 3 primary colors together. Why do I use blue and brown and why not red and green? Well, think about it. When you look outside, the most naturally occurring colors are going to be blues and browns. They're very earth tone friendly. When you look outside, I can see a lot of green, but there's not a lot of things that are red. So it makes using red in that case a little more challenging. And when you look at this color wheel, we have blue here, and then directly across from it is going to be orange. Right? So orange. Take it a step further. Under the different shades of orange, you can see in here that there is definitely some brown in there, and that's directly across from blue. So when you mix those colors together, orange and blue or brown and blue, you're gonna get a really nice dark color. All right. That's enough for my lesson on color. Today we're going to be painting simple shapes using just blue and brown. We're going to focus on value. We're not focusing too much on detail. There may be a little bit of texture involved, but I'm wanting you to understand more about gradients and graded washes, dry brushing, how to smooth out or soften out your edges, how to lift out color if you need to, and shadow. Light and shadow. As always, if you find this video helpful today, I really hope that you subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. All right, that's enough talking. Let's start painting. So here is the incredible drawing that we're working off of. I'm going to show you how to transfer it to your watercolor paper. Get a piece of charcoal. Do not rub your charcoal like that. That is just a setup for a big mess. We just want to cover where you see the lines. So lightly rubbing charcoal over the back of your picture. This you can do on any kind of picture that you want to transfer. Once we have the charcoal over the back, just kind of eyeball where I want it to be. Put a piece of tape on the top just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to push down with a pencil or a pen and trace all the lines that I see. This is just a guide. We are not here to draw. We're here to paint. With my pencil, I can kind of finish off some of the lines and expand my picture out just a little bit, extend the mountain out and some of those zigzags for that tree line in the background. In a landscape, you have atmospheric perspective, which means that things in the background are going to be lighter than things in the front. Like this big tree is going to have the most detail. It's going to be the darkest. The mountain is going to be the lightest. Let's wet the sky. We're going to put water, nice clean water, all around the sky. I'm not going to paint the tree. I'm not going to paint the mountain. I'm going to generally be pretty careful about putting my water on here. It doesn't have to be like sopping wet, you guys. It can just be damp, but I want to make sure that the water is all over the paper. And then you can kind of tip your paper or your board and see where the light is hitting, and if you've missed any spots, it'll be kind of dull. I'm going to mix together some ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna, And just a little bit of burnt sienna will go a long way here. I just don't want my sky to be this bright blue. I want to kind of dull it down just a little bit. If you find that you mix too much paint, you can move a section of that paint to a new area to mix and add more water. I'm just going to put some wisps in here. I generally feel like if you do horizontal or brush strokes that go kind of angular towards your center of your paper, mountain, etc., that works pretty well. All of the white areas are going to be clouds, so you don't have to paint the whole entire thing. I'm also putting a little bit of extra water in here on some of the areas that feel a little too brush strokey to me. I want it to soften up. Now I did get a little bit in that tree, so I just dabbed that with a paper towel and kind of just working my way around some of the elements so it feels clean, giving that watercolor a place to go. We're going to let that dry and move down to the ground. The ground is going to be the darkest at the very, very bottom. So I'm going to come in here with just burnt sienna, put a couple brush strokes there, clean out my brush with some clean water, and then take my brush right along that edge a couple of times, moving up the paper. We don't want to go down, and then dry my brush off, clean it and dry it off, and keep that forward, upward motion, taking that paint to the top. Now, if I feel like it's not gradual enough, I can start at the bottom with a clean brush, work my way back to the top, but don't go backwards. Just keep moving up the paper. And you might feel like when you get halfway through here, your paintbrush has picked up so much paint, you're going to need to wipe it off and start kind of where you ended and just smoothing that out a little bit. Just let the watercolor do its thing. Let's do the other side. So again, dark paint, clean your brush out. I wring it out on the side of my water container just to get some of the extra water out. And then moving up the paper. Once I've gotten about halfway, I'm going to clean my brush out, dry it off on my paper towel, and then start where I left off, going back and forth in that upward motion. Nice long strokes. I can actually paint over that tree trunk. That doesn't really matter. And I painted over the rocks because those are going to be the darkest thing. I feel like this needs to be smoothed out. So again, starting at the bottom, working my way up, not going back down. Keep going in the same direction. Clean my brush off, start again, pulling that paint through the rest of my picture. The sky's dry. Let's go back to the mountain. We want the mountain to be pretty light so that it fades into the background. This is not the focal point of our picture. You may think it is, but it's that weird bulby tree that's going to be the focal point. I'm going to mix together a blue that's around the same color as my sky, maybe a little bit darker. Ultramarine blue, a little bit of that burnt sienna. It kind of makes my blue a little more gray feeling, which is great. So it's not straight out of the tube. And then once I get that mixed together, again, pretty light, I'm going to scoop up that paint. Just load my brush, and I'm not going to come back and dip my brush in again. I'm going to start at the top and work my way around this tree so that the tree isn't painted, making nice, clean edges on those mountain top points. And then working that paint down to the bottom. I'm going to paint all the way through my little jagged tree line there. So basically all the way to the horizon. If your ground, the brown area, is still wet and you see some of that blue paint kind of seep its way into the brown, that's okay. Do not freak out. We're going to go for some kind of soft textures in the background there, and it will be totally fine. Now, if you feel like your mountain's a little on the dark side like I do, I just clean my brush off, dry it off with my paper towel, lift out some of that paint. As I'm lifting, my paintbrush is scooping up that paint. So I want to make sure that I'm cleaning my brush off frequently to get that paint out of there. Now we are going to, while that mountain is wet, drop in some burnt sienna. And by dropping, I mean load your brush up and just do some tapping. If you start doing paint strokes left to right, you're going to be moving the paint. When I just dab it on the paper, then it's going to deposit that paint where I touch it and lift up. You may notice that some of your paper is still a little bit wet, and I actually want that to happen. These trees in the back are not the focal point. See that soft area? That's what we want to have happen. We want it to fade into the background and suggest that there's a line of trees or a forest in the background there. If you feel like it's not softening up enough, you can just add a little bit of water to the tops of your trees. Don't spend too much time on it. Don't make it too detailed. Don't overthink it. In fact, I'm going to show you one of the students I have in my class and what her picture looked like. That's what I really want to have happen. But as I'm walking around my class and helping people, my paper dries a little more quickly than I want it to. But that's what we were going for. We're going to do some dry brushing on our path. With dry brushing, I find it to be most successful when I rub the flat side of my paintbrush along the paper. Hold your brush with these fingers, pinch it and lift it up, just like you're going to do that charcoal rubbing, but with a paintbrush. This will allow the paintbrush to be more parallel with your paper and glide horizontally. And so I'm just going to pick up some paint. We don't want it to be super duper wet. So holding my paintbrush like this, going across from left to right. Our sun is shining down on the left, casting shadows to the right. I'm just deciding that right now. So whatever direction you decide, stick with it, meaning all of your shadows are going to go to the right. There's going to be some grass on this edge, so I want the shadows to be cast to the right. Lightly gliding my paintbrush across the surface. We get some nice texture in there. Going from left to right, more of that texture on the left, kind of ending on that right side so it's a little lighter on the right. Once I feel like that's in a good spot, I can get some clean water and come back on the right hand side and just kind of soften up some of those edges. It will sort of bleed out that color a little bit. And then we can always go back in with a little bit darker paint to that left hand side and do some more dry brushing. Even while the paint there is still wet, some of it will mix together and create a really nice effect. But don't overdo it. We want the darkest part to stay towards the front, the most detail to stay in the front. So don't go crazy, just a little bit of texture. So you can see on that right hand side where it got all nice and soft. That's beautiful. That's what we were going for. So let's talk about mountains and how shadows work. Essentially, if you think about a mountain as a pyramid, the sun coming in from our left-hand side, the shadow is going to be cast around on the right-hand side. Then we have another mountain, and it intersects with the first mountain. We kind of erase what would be going behind. Now we have these two peaks, and they kind of come together somewhere here in the middle. And then the shadows would both be on the right-hand side. This is just a very basic concept of shading and mountain peaks. Okay, so we're going to use that concept as we paint our mountains. We have the shadows cast on the right-hand side, the sun coming down on the left-hand side. So we want to leave the left-hand side clean, paint the right-hand side, and I have those little guidelines in there so that we can paint on those sides. So mixing some blue and some brown, get a nice gray, something a little bit darker than what you currently have there for your mountain. That's important. We want it to be just a little bit darker. And we're going to follow the peak and only come to the edge of that line, then clean your brush out, dry it off on a paper towel, and soften those edges. Cleaning it off, soften the edges. We don't want to go too far over on the right-hand side. If we do that, it's going to make it wet and we won't be able to get that crisp line. So make sure that you're being really careful about that. Let the watercolor do the work for you. Okay, so nice and soft here. Then we'll come back and do the same thing with the next peak. So getting some paint, coming in nice and crisp, kind of working our way down just a little bit, and then clean the brush off, and then softening that paint down. I'm cleaning my brush off very frequently. And then let's do the third peak, same kind of thing. Shadow on the right-hand side, coming down, nice clean edges, and then softening up that paint, cleaning out my brush, drying it off a little bit, moving that paint down. Nice soft gradient, that's what we want. Up close, it may not look like what you want, so stand back and it should suggest that it's a mountain and there's some shadow. That's all we're going to do with it. Now let's talk about the trees. I have two trees. One tree in the front is going to be the darker tree of these two. The tree in the back should be the lightest of all three of the trees. Why I started painting as an example of this front tree, I don't know, but we're just going to go with it. So this front tree, what we're going to do is paint a nice dark line on that far right-hand edge. Because remember, our light is coming down from the top left and casting shadow on the right. And then we're going to blend that color as we go around. So with the small tree, dark color on the right-hand side, cleaning our brush off and rounding it out by just grabbing some of the edge of that paint and moving it over slightly, making sure that we're cleaning out our brush. If you find that it gets too far over, just clean your brush out and lift that color out. Now, when you're drawing these brush strokes, you need to make sure that your tree is going in a cone, starting at the top and rotating around. So when we do our brush strokes, we want to go down like this, go back up to the point, and then go down towards the bottom, back to the point, and then keep going around. You're spinning around from that top point. What we don't want to do is start from the top, then go to the edge and go down, and these sort of like weird angled lines. Yes, I can tell that tree is shaded, but realistically, that light would fall in a curve around the tree. We want it to feel curved. So we're always going to start at that tip and kind of circle our way around as we're shading. I'm going to load my paintbrush up with some paint, and I'm going to start with a small tree, which is what I should have done in my little example. That's okay. This way, if I start with a smaller tree, I know how much darker to make the bigger tree rather than working my way backwards. So I put some paint on that right edge, and then coming down the tree, moving my way around with a little less water, a cleaner brush, it should soften itself up. So let me load my brush up, get some nice dark paint here, maybe a little darker actually. So I'm just going to dab some more paint in there, and then start to work my way around. This is the same thing we did with the ground, except just a different shape. That's all we're doing. Softening that paint as it goes around. So cleaning my brush out and running it along that last painted edge. Clean it out, run it along that last painted edge. And you can see that I'm starting at the top and working my way down in sort of this center, from the center rotating. Now, I think I need to be darker, so I'm just going to deposit some dark paint. It's still wet, so I'm going to see how it moves on its own. If it doesn't move enough, I can help it. And I think the tree in the back also needs a little bit of help because it's blending too much into the mountain. I want that mountain to seem farther away. I need to just move some of this paint on this bigger tree. It's not moving enough on its own. So nice long brush strokes. Notice I'm not sketching, moving back and forth in these little tiny brush strokes, kind of moving from the top to the bottom. All right, so we'll just let that do its thing and soften itself up on its own. Now let's talk about rocks, about how hard it is to paint rocks. A couple little simple things. We want to paint the edge because the top is going to have the most sunlight. So I paint the bottom edges and the side of the rock that goes behind the other rock. Really simple. And then we can soften up that top edge just like we've done with all the other brush strokes we've painted. We paint that dark color and then we kind of come in and soften up that top edge of it. I missed a little spot, which is kind of cool. That works in a lot of ways. So drawing my edges, and then I will come in and kind of soften it up, maybe lift some of that paint out. Again, we're just trying to make a suggestion. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're gonna let that dry and talk about our trees. Now the trees have the sunlight coming from the top left. If you think about a tree, all the branches come out and they go around in a circle up that tree trunk, just like a plant. Plant grows with the branches of the plant coming out of the stem and going around in a circle, making their way upwards towards the light. This bottom section is a collection of branches with leaves all over it, coming straight out towards us, not flat. So it's catching the light on the top and then shadowed on the bottom, underneath. Same with all the other circles. They're all going to have shadows on the bottom right-hand side, essentially, and that top left is going to have the most light, generally speaking. If you go out and look at trees, start paying attention to where are the lightest leaves, where are the darkest leaves. I'm going to mix together the darkest color I have, and we're going to do a little practice. And it's the same concept that I've been using the whole time. So if I draw a half circle here, it's nice and dark, that's the bottom of that bottom circle. Then get my brush wet with clean water and come in here and kind of soften that color up, moving it upwards. Clean my brush again, keep moving it around until basically there's nothing there. Now I can soften that bottom just a little bit more and kind of blend it, just like we did with the ground. Okay, so now we have a nice circular shape. It's dark on the bottom right, and then we just keep working our way around, cleaning out our brush, drying it off, moving that paint around, and letting the watercolor soften itself. If you wanted to add leaves, you have the basic shape here, and then the leaves would start to come out, and the darker leaves would be on the right-hand side. So you just start blobbing in some little texture, and that's the basic idea for how a tree works. So nice and dark around here, get a lot of paint on there, and then we'll start softening it up. I might need to actually put some darker color down at the bottom. But we'll start with this, then soften it up, kind of move that paint around, and then while it's wet, I can just dab some dark color along the bottom and just let it do what it's going to do. then we'll just kind of keep moving our way up the tree. So mixing up more dark color. Don't be afraid to mix color. If you run out, just make some more. And if they start to bleed together, that's okay. If you find that it's like really bleeding together, just lift that color out. Clean your brush off. Don't get paper towel dab happy. I see a lot of people just get their paper towel and start dabbing their paper. And when you do that, it will damage the fibers of the paper. You're better to just kind of lift that color out with your paintbrush. Also, we want to do the trunk. The trunk is just like those tall pine tree shapes in the back. So dark on the right, lighter to the left. And then we don't want it sitting or floating. We want it to like be anchored into the ground. So while it's wet, clean your brush off and just smooth that color from left to right. I'm just dabbing some dark in here because we want this to be the darkest thing. While it's wet, I want it to just soften itself up on its own. Now going back to our rocks, we're going to put another dark layer. Now we want that line that we just painted on the bottom edge to stay nice and crisp, and we can soften the top edge. Leave that bottom edge nice and crisp. Okay, and you can soften it and move some paint around, and then we'll do the same thing for the rock on the bottom. And if you start to see where the rocks are light and dark based off of where the watercolor is drying, go with that. If you start to see it take shape, just go with it. So we'll put this dark around this rock here. And these aren't the most spectacular rocks I've ever done or anything, but it's communicating a point that these are some rocks. I might actually lift some of that color out. It's a little bit on the dark side, but whatever. So put some on the bottom here and then soften that up towards the top, leaving that nice crisp edge along the bottom. We're going to do some grass. This is going to really start to anchor this painting so that the darkest part is in the front. I'm just depositing some burnt sienna, straight up burnt sienna, nice and wet on the ground there. And while it's wet, I'm going to just drop or tap some ultramarine blue in the bottom and let it create some colored blooms for me on its own. Sometimes it will have some great texture when it does that. While it's wet, I'm cleaning my brush off and use the tip of it and just move that wet paint up and away, very lightly in kind of different angled strokes, some up, some a little to the left, a little to the right, and just kind of making the suggestion of some tall weeds. And maybe I'll just smooth this out along the path. Now with a lighter color, I can kind of dry brush or just sweep some very light color in that background just to give it a little bit of texture. And let's do the same on the other side. So nice amount of burnt sienna, wet brush, kind of plopping it in there. I can drop some ultramarine blue in the bottom, nice and wet, and just let it bloom out on its own and see what happens. Then use my clean brush to move those little blades of grass and then do some of that texture in the background, little short wisps. Nothing crazy. We're not overthinking it, just pretty simple. Okay, let's talk about shadows. These trees are going to be casting shadows, so I use blue. We're just going to go across the path. It may seem scary, but it should be translucent, pretty see-through. So it's going to go across the path, over to the other side, and then same with your tall tree here. It's going to go across to the right, and then the tree behind it is also going to cast a shadow. And that will just help it feel more believable and more real. And that's really all there is to it. A basic value study using shapes, not a lot of texture. I hope you enjoyed painting today with me, and I will see you next time that I make stuff.